Baby found German Shepherd guarding an empty crib. What she did next left everyone in tears. What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a moment in time that will stay with you forever. A moment that tested the strength of a child, the loyalty of a dog, and the fragile line between tragedy and triumph. This isn't fiction. It happened. And it might just change the way you see the world. Like, share, and let us know where you're watching from, because this story deserves to be heard. The first rays of morning slid through the thin curtains, spilling pale gold across the nursery floor. Dust motes floated lazily in the light, drifting between the soft hum of a lullaby that still played from the little music box on the shelf. The room was still, almost serene, except for one jarring detail. The crib was empty. At the far side of the room, beside the crib's white wooden frame, sat a German Shepherd. Luna's body was rigid, her muscles drawn tight beneath her glossy coat. She wasn't lying down or pacing. She was anchored to that spot as if her presence alone could hold the world in place. Her eyes were locked on the open window, the morning breeze stirring the curtains into restless sways. Every few seconds her ears twitched, catching something beyond the reach of human hearing. A sound distant but sharp enough to keep her attention fixed. From somewhere down the hallway came the muffled clatter of hurried footsteps, growing louder with each second. Emily's voice was calling, not words at first, just an anxious rush of sound. The rhythm of her steps changed as she reached the nursery door, her shadow flashing briefly across the sunlit floor before she burst into the room. She froze. For a heartbeat, Emily's mind refused to make sense of what she was seeing. The crib, the place where Lily should have been sleeping soundly, stood open and bare. The blanket she had tucked around her just an hour earlier was crumpled near the far corner, the faintest imprint of a small body still pressed into its folds. The lullaby continued to play, sweet and incongruous, its tinny melody like a cruel joke in the tense air. Luna's gaze didn't shift toward Emily. She remained trained on the window, her body angled protectively between the crib and the thin square of morning sky beyond the fluttering curtains. Her breathing was steady but low, nostrils flaring as she caught something in the air, a scent Emily could not detect. Emily's throat went dry. She stumbled forward, her hands gripping the crib's railing as if bracing herself against a sudden drop. Her pulse hammered in her ears, drowning out the music box, drowning out everything except the terrifying emptiness before her. In that instant, the room seemed to tilt. The soft blues and creams of the nursery blurred at the edges, and time stretched. Emily's mind flung itself into frantic motion. Had she left the window open? Had she heard anything? Where was Lily? Each question ricocheted against the next, none finding an answer. Luna's ears twitched again. Without a sound, she shifted her stance, her tail low, her weight forward, as if ready to spring. The faint creak of the rocking chair in the corner barely registered for Emily, but it made Luna's head snap slightly to the side before returning to the window. Emily's knees weakened, and she pressed one hand against her chest, willing her breath to slow, but it only came faster, ragged. She looked at Luna, searching for some clue in those deep brown eyes. Instead, she saw something that sent a shiver through her, not panic, not confusion, but focus, a razor-sharp awareness that told her Luna knew something she didn't. The breeze through the window grew stronger, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and something else Emily couldn't place. Luna's nose lifted slightly, nostrils flaring once, twice, before she exhaled in a low huff. The shepherd's paws shifted on the hardwood, claws clicking softly. Emily's breath caught when she finally turned her gaze toward the open window. The screen was intact, but it sat slightly ajar, as if it had been nudged from the outside. Her mind leapt to the worst possibilities, each more unbearable than the last. She gripped the crib rail harder, knuckles whitening, her vision narrowing to the rhythmic sway of the curtain. Then Luna moved. It was subtle at first, a shift of weight, a tightening in her stance, and then, in a single smooth motion, she turned her head toward Emily. Her eyes held a message Emily couldn't read but felt deep in her gut. "Follow me." Before Emily could speak, Luna's ears snapped forward again, her gaze locking once more on the unseen point beyond the window. The room felt charged, as if every molecule of air was waiting for something to happen. Emily's heart was a wild drumbeat in her chest. And then, in a blink, Luna's muscles bunched like coiled springs. What happened next would pull Emily from the safety of her home, carry her beyond the edge of her own fear, and reveal a truth that no one, not even the people who thought they knew Luna best, could have expected. Because what Luna did after that changed everything. And no one saw it coming. Mornings in Emily's home began with the soft sounds of the countryside, the low murmur of doves in the trees, the rustle of wind through tall grass, and the occasional distant hum of a tractor starting up somewhere down the road. The house itself was small but filled with warmth, every surface touched by signs of a life built carefully and lovingly. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows, spilling across the worn oak table where Emily kept a mug of coffee within reach as she moved between the counter and stove. In the middle of it all was Luna. The German Shepherd had been part of Emily's life for 4 years, long enough to learn the rhythms of the household as if they were her own. She moved through the rooms with quiet confidence, her nails clicking softly on the hardwood as she made her morning rounds. If Emily was in the kitchen, Luna was stationed just at the doorway, close enough to keep watch, far enough not to get underfoot. But her true devotion, the center of her attention, was baby Lily. Every morning, Emily would set Lily on a soft blanket in the living room while she cooked breakfast. Luna would immediately lower herself onto the rug beside her, front legs stretched out, her head resting gently on her paws. Lily, with her chubby hands and easy giggle, would reach toward Luna's ears or grab at the thick fur along her neck. Luna never flinched, never pulled away. She'd simply turn her head, watching the baby with patient, steady eyes. Sometimes Emily would pause in her work just to watch them. There was something about the way Lily's little fingers tangled in Luna's fur, the way Luna seemed to instinctively adjust her position so the baby could lean against her without toppling over. It was as if they spoke in a language only they understood, a quiet exchange of trust and comfort. On sunny days, Emily would carry Lily out to the back porch, and Luna would follow without being told. They'd sit together in the patch of sunlight that spilled across the steps, Lily babbling in her soft, musical voice while Luna tilted her head as though listening to every word. Emily liked to joke that Luna was the best babysitter she could have asked for, one who never needed reminding, never asked for breaks, and never failed to keep watch. Their little home in the rural neighborhood was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names. Neighbors waved as they passed by, sometimes stopping to chat about weather or the latest community news. Children rode their bikes down the gravel road, and older couples tended to gardens that bloomed in neat rows behind low fences. It wasn't the sort of place where you locked your doors in the daytime. There was a comfort in that, a sense of safety that wrapped around Emily's life like a well-worn quilt. Inside that quilt, her days were predictable in the best way. Breakfasts were followed by tidying up, laundry folded into neat stacks on the couch, Lily's naps taken in the small nursery painted a soft butter yellow. During those naps, Luna would settle just outside the nursery door, her chin on her paws, eyes half closed but never fully asleep. Emily had noticed that even the slightest sound from the crib, a restless whimper or the rustle of a blanket, would bring Luna to full alert. She'd rise quietly, nose nudging the door open a fraction, and peer inside until she was satisfied that all was well. It wasn't just vigilance. It was something gentler, more deliberate. If Lily stirred in her crib, Luna might let out the faintest sigh and return to her spot, or, on rare occasions, She'd step into the room and lie on the rug near the crib until the baby drifted back into sleep. Emily often wondered if Luna thought of herself as more than a pet, perhaps as a guardian with a duty she'd chosen herself. In the afternoons, the three of them would take short walks along the lane, Luna pacing beside the stroller with her head level to the handlebar, ears swiveling toward every bird call and passing breeze. Lily would reach out occasionally, tiny fingers brushing the thick fur on Luna's shoulder. Emily would smile, thinking how natural it seemed for them to move through the world like this, side by side, one watching over the other. Evenings were quieter still. Dinner for Emily, kibble for Luna, mashed vegetables for Lily. Afterward, they'd gather in the living room, Emily with a book in her lap, Luna stretched out at her feet, and Lily rolling gently between them on the blanket. It was a rhythm Emily cherished, a life anchored by small, ordinary joys that stacked up day by day into something she thought would last unchanged for years. Looking back, she would remember those evenings with a kind of bittersweet clarity. She'd remember the smell of bread baking in the oven, the sound of Lily's laughter mingling with the faint whir of the ceiling fan, and the way Luna's eyes softened in the low light. She'd remember believing without question that nothing could shatter the calm they had built. And in that certainty, she never imagined that the same dog who lay so gently beside her daughter would soon stand between Lily and a danger Emily couldn't yet see, a danger that would turn their quiet little world on its head. The smell of sizzling butter filled the kitchen, mingling with the faint sweetness of bread toasting in the oven. Emily moved between the stove and counter, her mind wandering in the quiet of the morning. Lily had gone down for her nap less than 20 minutes ago, and the house had fallen into that rare, precious stillness that mothers learn to treasure. Somewhere above her, the soft hum of the baby monitor sat on the shelf, its tiny green light pulsing steadily. Luna was lying in the doorway, chin resting on her paws, eyes half closed. The morning light coming through the back window glinted off her black and tan coat, warming the curve of her shoulder. She seemed utterly relaxed, until she wasn't. It started with her ears. One moment they were loose, angled lazily to the side. The next, they flicked forward with a sharpness that caught Emily's attention. Luna lifted her head, nostrils flaring in quick, deliberate sniffs. The change in her posture was subtle but unmistakable. Her body grew still, muscles tightening under her fur, her gaze cutting toward the front of the house. "What is it, girl?" Emily asked softly, glancing toward the window. She heard nothing. The hum of the refrigerator, the gentle hiss of the pan, that was all. Luna didn't look at her. She inhaled again, deep this time, as if pulling a thread of scent from the air. Then came the noise, faint, almost too faint to register. A rustle? A creak? Emily paused, holding the spatula midair, straining to catch it again. All she heard now was the distant hum of an engine somewhere down the road, the sound muffled by the walls of the house. It was enough for Luna. In a sudden surge of movement, she was on her feet and gone, nails clicking across the hardwood as she sprinted toward the stairs. "Luna!" Emily called, startled. She turned down the burner and followed, the sound of the shepherd's paws echoing up the stairwell. Halfway up, Emily heard it, the nursery door slamming hard against the wall. The bang ricocheted through her chest, snapping her into a full sprint. Her mind raced ahead of her feet. Had Luna chased a bird in through the open window? Had something fallen? She reached the top of the stairs, breath shallow, and turned into the nursery. The room was awash with soft morning light, the curtains shifting gently in the breeze from the open window. The music box on the shelf was still playing, the tinny lullaby spilling notes into the air. Luna was standing beside the crib, her body rigid, her head high, eyes locked on the fluttering curtain. Her chest rose and fell in quick bursts, each inhale sharp and purposeful. Emily's gaze dropped to the crib, and the world stopped. It was empty. The blanket was rumpled, bunched toward one side, as though Lily had only just been there. Emily's hands flew to the railing, her fingers digging into the wood as her eyes darted wildly around the room. The rocking chair sat motionless in the corner, the soft toy rabbit still resting on its arm. The floor was clear, no sign of her baby crawling nearby. Her heart pounded against her ribs, the sound of her pulse drowning out the lullaby. She looked at Luna, desperate for an answer. The shepherd's stance was unlike anything Emily had seen before, tail low but steady, shoulders squared, eyes alive with something between alertness and resolve. "Where's Lily?" The question came out hoarse. A whisper meant more for herself than the dog. Luna shifted her weight, glancing back at Emily for the briefest moment before returning her focus to the window. Her ears twitched once, twice, then her nose lifted higher, catching something in the air that Emily couldn't. The breeze stirred again, stronger this time, carrying the faint smell of earth and something else, faint but unfamiliar. Emily's mind scrambled for logic. Had Lily somehow climbed out? Impossible. She was far too small. Had the window been open all night? No, she had closed it after airing the room early that morning. The air in the nursery felt different now, heavier, charged. Every instinct in Emily screamed that something had happened, something she couldn't yet see. Luna's body language only deepened that certainty. The shepherd was no longer just watching, she was readying herself. Emily's breath came fast, each inhale sharp and shallow. Her grip on the crib tightened until her knuckles burned. She opened her mouth to call Lily's name, but no sound came out. Then, in a single decisive movement, Luna stepped forward, placing herself squarely between Emily and the open window. Her muscles rippled under her coat, her gaze locked not on the curtain but on something beyond it, something only she could sense. The moment hung suspended in the air, the room shrinking around them. The lullaby wound toward its final notes, each chime ringing thin and fragile against the tension that filled the space. Emily didn't know it yet, but in the next few seconds, Luna would act. And whatever had taken Lily from her crib would find itself facing far more than just a frightened mother. Luna's muscles quivered with contained energy, her eyes locked on the fluttering curtain as the wind slipped into the nursery. She stepped forward, placing both front paws on the low windowsill, her claws scraping lightly against the wood. Her nose pressed toward the open air, inhaling in sharp bursts, each breath deeper than the last. Emily's voice trembled. "Luna, what is it?" The shepherd didn't glance back. She pawed at the window frame once, twice, as if urging Emily to understand. Whatever had drawn her here was out there, and it wasn't gone yet. Then, with a sudden burst of motion, Luna dropped back to the floor, turned, and sprinted out the nursery door. Emily hesitated only long enough to feel her stomach knot, then she was running after her. Her bare feet slapped against the hardwood, the cold sting of it making each step sharper. Down the stairs, through the hall. The front door banged open just ahead of her as Luna shoved it wide with her shoulder and bounded into the yard. The morning light outside was brighter than in the nursery, almost too bright. Emily squinted against it, heart racing, scanning the yard for any sign of Lily. But Luna wasn't searching with her eyes. Her nose was the map now. She moved in wide arcs at first, head low, tail rigid, her path erratic to the untrained eye but purposeful to her own. Every few feet she stopped to draw in another deep breath, nostrils twitching before moving on. Emily's panic rose with each passing second. "Lily!" she shouted, her voice cracking. The only answer was the faint rustle of wind through the tall grass beyond the garden fence. She stumbled after Luna, catching sight of the shepherd's tense silhouette against the sunlit green. There was no hesitation in her movements. It was as though the rest of the world had faded and only that trail, that invisible thread of scent, remained. Emily's mind flashed with memories, unbidden but sharp. She saw Luna 2 summers ago, leaping to block a toddler from tumbling down the Hendersons' back steps during a birthday party. The boy's mother had gasped, not realizing until afterward that Luna had spotted his misstep before anyone else. Another time, in early spring, Emily had found Luna standing between the porch and a thick-bodied copperhead that had slithered too close. She hadn't barked, hadn't lunged, just planted herself firmly in its path until Emily could usher Lily safely inside. This was that same posture now, only amplified, every muscle and instinct primed for one task: protect. Luna reached the edge of the yard, where the trimmed grass gave way to the wilder growth near the fence line. Her nose skimmed the ground, then lifted, testing the air again. Without slowing, she veered toward a gap in the fence where the boards leaned slightly apart, just wide enough for a person to slip through. Emily's breath hitched. The garden gate was still latched. Whatever had passed through here hadn't used it. She ducked under the leaning boards, her heartbeat thundering as she followed Luna into the narrow strip of overgrown weeds beyond. The scent trail must have sharpened because Luna's pace quickened. She trotted forward with long, steady strides, her head low, ears flicking at every distant sound. Emily could see the change, the way her tail swayed slightly now, the way her body seemed to pull forward as though the scent was growing stronger. The strip of weeds opened into the start of the tree line. Sunlight filtered down in broken shards, dappling the earth in gold and shadow. Luna paused there, nostrils flaring wide. She turned her head slightly to the right, then froze, her whole body stiff. Emily's lungs burned, but she stayed silent, watching her dog like she'd never watched her before. Luna took one slow step forward, then another, every muscle taut. Then, without warning, she pushed ahead into the trees, weaving between the trunks with a speed that made Emily scramble to keep up. The ground here was soft underfoot, a mix of fallen leaves and damp earth. Emily's toes caught on roots, her breath loud in her own ears, but she didn't dare stop. Every time she lost sight of Luna's back, a spike of fear shot through her until she caught a flash of black and tan between the trees. She wanted to call Lily's name again, but something in Luna's focus made her hold her tongue. This wasn't the frantic, scattered search of a person in panic. It was deliberate, exact. Emily realized with a cold clarity that Luna wasn't just looking. She was following. And whatever she was following was close enough to smell. They broke into a narrow clearing, the undergrowth trampled in a way that made Emily's stomach twist. Luna stopped dead in the center, nose to the ground, inhaling deeply. She lifted her head toward the deeper woods, her ears swiveling to catch a sound Emily couldn't hear. The breeze shifted, and Emily caught a faint, familiar scent, Lily's baby powder, mingled with the warm, faintly sweet smell of her blanket. Emily's throat tightened. The scent was moving away from them. Luna's eyes fixed on a point beyond the clearing, and Emily didn't need words to know what came next. The shepherd crouched slightly, weight forward, and in the next instant, she was moving again, faster this time, the invisible trail pulling her toward the heart of the woods. Emily followed, her fear sharpening into something more primal, more determined. Whatever had taken her baby had left a trail, and Luna was on it. And heaven help whoever, or whatever, was waiting at the other end. The air grew cooler as they pressed deeper into the trees. The scent of damp earth thickened, mingling with the faint tang of decaying leaves. Sunlight barely reached the ground here, broken into slivers that danced between the branches. Luna moved like a shadow ahead of Emily, each paw landing silently, her tail low, her head fixed on the path ahead. Emily's breathing was ragged now, both from exertion and the fear clawing at her chest. She didn't know how long they'd been running. Seconds felt like minutes, minutes like hours, but she could feel they were closing in on something. Then Luna slowed. At first, Emily thought the dog had lost the scent, but as she drew closer, she saw why. The ground beneath them was disturbed, broken twigs, patches of flattened grass, and there, clear in the soft soil, a set of fresh footprints. They were deep enough to belong to someone moving quickly, but not running full tilt. Whoever it was, they'd been here moments ago. Luna sniffed the prints, then turned her head toward a narrow slope just beyond them. Emily followed her gaze and saw it, something pale against the shadows. Her heart seized. A scrap of fabric, soft pink, half hidden under a fallen branch. She recognized it instantly. Lily's blanket. She lunged forward, but Luna moved faster, planting herself squarely between Emily and the slope. The shepherd's ears were up, her body rigid. Her gaze wasn't on the blanket now, it was on the tree line beyond. Emily froze, following her eyes. A figure stood there, partially obscured by the trunks. It was too far to make out details, but she could see the outline. Tall, shoulders hunched, head turning sharply as if startled by their presence. For a single, suspended heartbeat, no one moved. Then Luna barked. The sound exploded through the stillness, deep and resonant, the kind of bark that could shake the nerve of anyone on the receiving end. She barked again, each sharp report echoing through the trees, reverberating off the hollow spaces between branches. The figure flinched. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. She stepped back instinctively, but Luna stepped forward, her body a barrier of muscle and intent. The fur along her spine bristled, her teeth just visible as she growled low and steady. The stranger shifted, the movement jerky, almost unsure, then, without warning, turned and bolted deeper into the woods. Luna barked again, lunging a step forward, but stopped short of pursuit, instead holding her ground between Emily and the path where the figure had disappeared. Emily's knees weakened as adrenaline flooded through her. She bent and picked up the blanket, her hands trembling so badly she could barely clutch it. The familiar softness of the fabric nearly undid her. She could smell Lily's faint baby powder scent still clinging to it. Her eyes stung. She pressed the blanket to her face for the briefest moment, letting the smell anchor her before lowering it again. The thought of how close they had come, how easily this moment could have ended differently, hit her like a cold wave. If Luna hadn't been there, she swallowed hard, unable to finish the thought. The woods were quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that brought peace. It was heavy, expectant, as if the trees themselves had been holding their breath during the standoff. Emily glanced in the direction the stranger had run, seeing only shifting shadows and the sway of leaves disturbed by their passing. Luna turned toward her now, her growl fading into a soft huff. Her eyes scanned Emily's face as though checking for injury, then dropped to the blanket in her hands. Emily realized she was still clutching it to her chest like a lifeline. "I'm okay," she whispered, more to herself than to Luna. "We're okay." But they weren't. Not yet. Lily was still out here, somewhere beyond the safety of their home, and the person who had been near her crib, the person Luna had just driven off, had left no sign of their intentions except for this scrap of fabric. The reality of it settled into Emily's bones like ice. She wasn't just fighting to get her daughter back. She was racing against something she didn't understand, someone she didn't know, and the clock was already ticking. Luna stepped to her side, her body pressing lightly against Emily's leg, her warmth grounding in the chill of the moment. She looked toward the deeper woods again, her posture tense but ready, the same way she had stood on the porch that spring day with the snake, the same way she had once planted herself in front of a tumbling toddler. Only this time, the stakes were higher. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, took one more steadying breath, and nodded. "Okay," she said softly, meeting Luna's gaze. "Lead the way." The shepherd turned, the blanket's scent still fresh in her mind, and stepped forward into the shadows. Emily followed without hesitation, the weight of the near-miss burning behind her ribs. They had been seconds, maybe even less, from losing everything. The woods seemed to swallow them whole as they moved deeper, the light thinning until it became a dim patchwork of gold and shadow on the forest floor. Every sound felt sharper here, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the rustle of a squirrel in the undergrowth, the distant snap of a branch somewhere ahead. Luna's pace was steady but purposeful. Her nose skimmed the ground, lifted to the air, then dipped again, her tail held low but stiff, her entire being tuned to the trail. Emily followed close, clutching Lily's blanket so tightly that her fingers ached. She didn't dare speak. The rhythm of Luna's movements seemed too precise, too vital, to risk breaking. The terrain began to slope downward, the air growing cooler. Luna paused at the crest of a small hill, nostrils flaring. She turned her head sharply to the left, ears swiveling, and without hesitation, began to descend. Emily's breath caught as she stumbled after her, sliding on loose soil, catching herself on the rough bark of a tree. And then she saw it. Through a break in the trees, a small clearing lay ahead, a patch of sunlight spilling across its center. In the middle of it, on a bed of flattened grass, was a tiny shape wrapped in pale fabric. Lily, Emily's voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. She broke into a run, but Luna reached the baby first. The shepherd slowed as she approached, her body lowering instinctively, tail curling in a protective arc. She nosed the bundle gently, the soft sound of a baby's fussing rising into the quiet air. Luna positioned herself on one side of Lily, pressing close enough that her flank almost covered the child. Her head lifted, eyes locking on Emily as if to say, "She's here. She's safe. But I'm not leaving until you take her." Emily dropped to her knees, hands trembling as she scooped her daughter into her arms. Lily's face scrunched for a moment before her cries quieted into soft hiccups, her tiny fingers curling against Emily's collarbone. The familiar warmth, the weight of her, it sent a wave of relief so powerful through Emily that it buckled her. She held her close, breathing in the powdery scent of her hair, tears spilling freely now. "Oh, baby, I've got you. I've got you," she murmured over and over, her voice shaking. Luna sat back on her haunches but didn't move far. Her gaze flicked between Emily and the edges of the clearing, ears still twitching at every faint sound. The shepherd's chest rose and fell slowly, the adrenaline fading from her body but her alertness unbroken. Emily looked up at her, eyes blurred with tears. "Good girl," she whispered, the words thick with gratitude. "You brought me to her." They stayed there for a long moment, Emily holding Lily, Luna keeping silent watch, until the tremor in Emily's hands finally began to ease. She shifted Lily higher against her shoulder, tucking the blanket snugly around her, then reached out to rest a hand on Luna's head. The shepherd leaned into the touch, just enough to acknowledge it, before resuming her scan of the trees. "Let's go home," Emily said softly. The walk back was slower. Emily's steps were careful, her eyes darting between the path ahead and the little bundle in her arms. Luna moved beside her now, her body angled protectively toward them, her pace adjusting to match Emily's. As they neared the edge of the woods, the sounds of the neighborhood began to filter in, the distant bark of another dog, the faint hum of voices. And then Emily heard something else, her name being called. They stepped out of the trees to find a small crowd gathered at the end of her yard. Neighbors stood clustered together, concern etched on their faces. Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes wet. Mr. Bailey, still in his work overalls, stepped forward first. "We heard the barking," he said, voice low. It echoed all the way down the lane. "We knew something was wrong." Emily tightened her hold on Lily, unable to stop the fresh rush of tears. "She's okay," she managed, glancing down at her daughter. "She's safe, thanks to Luna." All eyes turned to the shepherd. Luna stood at Emily's side, chest heaving lightly, her gaze calm but unreadable. Someone murmured, "Good dog," and another neighbor stepped forward, crouching slightly to scratch her head. Luna accepted it with quiet dignity, her focus never fully leaving Emily and Lily. Emily carried her daughter up the porch steps, pausing just long enough to turn back toward the yard. "She saved her," she said, her voice carrying just enough for the group to hear. "She found her and if she didn't leave her side." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. No one said anything for a beat, and then Mrs. Henderson wiped her eyes and nodded, the smallest, most solemn gesture of agreement. Inside, the familiar smell of home wrapped around Emily like a blanket. She set Lily gently in her crib, tucking the edges of the blanket around her, and glanced down to see Luna settle herself on the rug beside it, just as she always did. Only now, Emily understood in a way she never had before, this wasn't just habit. This was a promise. The flashing red and blue lights cut across the quiet street, casting moving shadows on the walls of Emily's home. Luna's ears twitched at the sight, but she didn't move from her spot beside Lily's crib. Emily stood in the doorway of the nursery, keeping one hand on the crib rail, the other clutching the baby monitor as if it still connected her to her daughter's safety. Downstairs, two uniformed officers spoke quietly with Mr. Bailey, who had stayed until help arrived. Emily could hear the low murmur of their voices, the occasional scratch of a pen on paper. She took a steadying breath, then lifted Lily into her arms and headed down, Luna following close behind, her nails clicking softly against the wood. The taller of the two officers turned at the sound. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Emily nodded, though her voice was still shaky. "We're fine. Because of her." She glanced down at Luna, who stood squarely at her side. One officer knelt slightly, his gaze moving from the dog to the blanket Emily still held draped over one arm. "Your neighbor said you found this in the woods?" "Yes," Emily said. "Luna," she tracked Lily's scent, "led me right to her." The officers exchanged a look, and the taller one motioned toward the yard. "Mind showing us where you came out of the woods?" Emily led them to the gap in the fence and pointed toward the trees beyond. The shorter officer knelt to study the ground, his flashlight beam sweeping across the soil. Fresh prints stood out in the soft earth, the same ones Emily had seen earlier, now clearer in the artificial light. "These are recent," he said, glancing at his partner. "Then deep. Whoever it was wasn't just passing through." The taller officer straightened, his jaw tightening. "We've been looking for someone who matches the size and gait of these prints. Wanted in connection with a string of break-ins around the county. Some of those incidents happened while families were home." Emily's grip on Lily tightened. The image of the shadowed figure in the woods came back in a flash, sending a shiver down her spine. "So you think—" She didn't finish the sentence. The taller officer nodded grimly. "Ma'am, I think your dog saved your baby's life. If she hadn't sounded the alarm and kept that person from getting any closer, this could have ended very differently." Emily looked down at Luna again, her throat tightening. The shepherd sat calmly, her gaze moving between Emily and the dark line of the trees, as if still keeping watch. "She knew," Emily murmured, half to herself. "Even before I did." The officers asked a few more questions, took photographs of the prints, and promised to patrol the area more heavily in the coming days. By the time they left, the adrenaline in Emily's system was fading into something heavier, exhaustion laced with a sobering realization of how close she'd come to losing everything. Word spread quickly. The next morning, Emily woke to a knock at her door. A young woman with a press badge and a camera crew stood outside. "Are you Emily Carson?" she asked, her voice bright with practiced enthusiasm. "We heard about your dog, the German shepherd who guarded an empty crib and led you to your baby." Emily hesitated, glancing over her shoulder at Luna, who stood just behind her. That's her. The woman smiled warmly. We'd love to share your story. People need to hear about this kind of heroism. Before Emily knew it, she was standing on her front porch, Lily balanced on her hip, answering questions about that morning. The camera captured her words, the trembling in her hands, and the way Luna stood at her side, regal and calm, her ears flicking at every passing sound. The story aired that evening on the local news under the headline, "German Shepherd Guard's Empty Crib Saves Baby's Life." They played footage of Luna in the yard, her steady gaze and poised stance making her look every bit the hero she was. Emily's voiceover told the rest, how Luna had sensed something, how she had acted without hesitation, how she had stayed with Lily until Emily could reach her. Calls came in from friends, neighbors, even strangers. Some wanted to congratulate her, others simply to say they were moved by the story. One woman wrote in, saying it reminded her of the dog she'd had as a child, a dog who had once stood guard by her bed all night when she was sick. That night, as the house settled into quiet again, Emily sat in the living room with Luna curled at her feet and Lily asleep upstairs. She thought back to every moment of that morning, the subtle change in Luna's body language, the way she'd bolted upstairs, the strength in her stance as she faced down a stranger. It struck Emily then that Luna had been preparing for this moment all along. Every time she'd stood by the nursery door during naps, every time she'd placed herself between Lily and some small, harmless threat, it hadn't just been instinct. It had been training of a kind, a lifelong habit of vigilance born from love. She reached down, resting her hand on the warm fur of Luna's neck. "You knew," she whispered. "Long before I did." Luna didn't move, but Emily felt the gentle pressure of her leaning just slightly into her touch. For the first time since that morning, Emily allowed herself to close her eyes, trusting that Luna, as she always had, would keep watch. The Saturday after the news aired, Emily opened her front door to find a small group gathered on her porch. Mrs. Henderson was there, holding a plate of still warm oatmeal cookies. Beside her, two neighborhood children clutched construction paper cards, the edges curled and decorated with hand-drawn paw prints in bright crayon colors. "We thought she deserved a little celebration," Mrs. Henderson said with a smile, her eyes crinkling. "Our hero." Word must have spread quickly, because within the hour, more people began to arrive. Someone set up a folding table in the yard, covering it with baked goods and small gifts, biscuits and toys wrapped in ribbon for Luna, flowers for Emily. Mr. Bailey even brought a large, framed photo he'd printed from the news broadcast. Luna standing in the yard, her posture proud, her eyes fixed on the camera. Children ran up to pet her, each one taking turns telling Emily their version of the story. Some had been close enough to hear the barking that morning. Others had heard about it from their parents. One little boy, no older than 6, handed Luna his favorite toy ball. "She's braver than me," he said simply. Luna took it gently, holding it in her mouth for a moment before setting it at his feet, tail giving a slow, steady wag. She seemed to understand that all this attention wasn't just for her. It was gratitude, pure and unfiltered. Emily moved between neighbors, offering thanks, introducing Lily to those who hadn't met her yet. The baby was her usual curious self, reaching toward the bright cards and the colorful plates of cookies. Luna stayed close, weaving between Emily and Lily with an ease that was second nature. Later, as the sun dipped low and the crowd began to thin, Emily sat on the porch steps with Lily in her lap and Luna at her side. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of cookies and the laughter of the last few children playing in the yard. She looked down at Luna, who lay with her head resting on her front paws, eyes half closed but ears still attuned to every sound. "You know," Emily began, speaking softly enough that only Luna could hear, "I keep thinking about that morning. How you moved before I even knew something was wrong. How you didn't hesitate." Luna opened her eyes, glancing up briefly before settling again. "I used to think of you as our protector," Emily continued, "but I didn't really understand what that meant. Not until I saw you put yourself between Lily and whatever was out there. That wasn't just instinct, was it? That was love. The kind that doesn't wait for permission. The kind that acts before it even thinks." She paused, feeling the weight of the moment. "You've always been there, at the door, beside her crib, walking next to us down the road. I thought it was just habit, but now I know. You were always watching, always ready." The porch light flickered on as evening settled in. Fireflies began to blink in the yard, and the air cooled slightly. Emily shifted Lily, who was beginning to doze, her tiny hand clutching the edge of her mother's shirt. For her older neighbors, many of whom had raised children of their own, the story had sparked something deeper, a reminder that safety is rarely an accident. It's built, moment by moment, through trust, vigilance, and bonds that words can't fully capture. Emily hoped that was what people took away from all this, that love, in its truest form, isn't just about affection. It's about showing up, standing guard, and never letting your guard down when it matters most. As the last of the neighbors waved goodbye, Emily leaned back against the porch post, letting the quiet return. The day had been full of gratitude, but it was here, in the calm, that she felt the lesson settle in her heart. She thought about how often in life we overlook the protectors among us. Not just dogs, but people too. The neighbor who notices when your porch light is out. The friend who calls when you've gone quiet. The loved one who senses your mood before you've said a word. Most of the time, their vigilance goes unseen, unthanked. But sometimes, like that morning, it becomes impossible to miss. Luna shifted, pressing her shoulder lightly against Emily's leg. The movement was small, but it carried a certainty that needed no translation. Emily smiled faintly, brushing her fingers through the shepherd's fur. "You didn't just save my daughter's life," she whispered, her voice steady now. "You reminded me that Rayal love never rests." And in the soft glow of the porch light, with Lily sleeping in her arms and Luna keeping silent watch, Emily knew that those words would stay with her for the rest of her life. Sometimes, the most profound connections are the ones we can't explain. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe to continue exploring the mysteries of life. Until then, remember, there's magic in the unknown.